Okay. My name is Lasse Stender. I'm from the North Denmark region. I'm a lawyer and I'm specialized in European and national procurement law. I'm the author of the legal chapter in the final SPICE report, which will be presented today. The legal chapter, which you will find obviously in the report being made public in a few hours or maybe tomorrow. It's a comprehensive presentation of legal issues to be considered when planning and completing public procurement projects aiming at the acquisition of innovative solutions within the thematic fields of SPICE, which is transport, ITS, and mobility. The legal chapter is of 53 pages, and it's based on 30+ cases, based on interviews, workshops, and also, of course, the general knowledge of the SPICE team. Although the chapter's comprehensive character is, it's quite important to stress that the legal chapter is not a manual on procurement of innovation, nor a handbook. The legal chapter is an attempt to raise awareness of a range of legal issues linked to procurement of innovation and to systematize these issues into certain categories in a view to make the considerations more logical for also non-legal persons. The legal chapter consists of 5 chapters, the first being a discussion on the concept of procurement of innovation. The second is about the legal framework for procurement in Europe. The third chapter is a chapter on choosing between the procurement procedures in the procurement directives. The fourth chapter is about choosing between different procurement approaches, and the fifth chapter is about choosing between different contractual approaches. It should be stressed that the legal chapter is not a high-level document. It's written mainly for project managers and all other professionals working with or about to work with procurement projects involving innovative solutions. The chapter does not require great pre-knowledge or experience on procurement projects. However, the chapter is not a manual, as I said, or a handbook on innovation procurement, and thus it does not cover all aspects of a procurement procedure. So the legal chapter is maybe most suitable for professionals with just a little knowledge of or experience in procurement projects, for instance, basic knowledge of the different procurement procedures provided for in the procurement directives. I will, however, stress that I very much recommend anyone interested in innovation procurement to read the legal chapter, as it gives great insight into important considerations that should be done prior to and during innovation procurement projects. I should also mention that we're and the last thing I will say about this intro is that the chapter also contains findings that I think will be very interesting also for legal professionals who've been working with procurement law for several years. Before I carry on, I would like to mention that the Commission issued its Commission's guidance on innovation procurement earlier in May this year, which is a general introduction to procurement of research and development and innovation. The Commission's guidance includes a basic explanation of general principles of procurement of research and development and innovation and related topics, for instance, the importance of making good business cases prior to procurement projects. And the guidance also includes a description of the several cases of research and development and innovation. For instance, 2 cases collected by SPICE during 2017. And the legal chapter contains a link to the Commission's guidance on innovation procurement for anyone being interested. The first chapter, which is chapter 3, in the report, the first legal chapter is dealing with the concept of procurement and procurement of innovation, and the difference between procurement of research and development, and procurement of innovation. It's very important already here to mention that SPICE is about procurement of innovation and it's not about procurement of research and development. As an introduction, the first chapter of the legal part of the report introduces the definition of procurement as it's understood in the EU procurement directives. As mentioned in Article 1 in the Procurement Directive, procurement is defined as the acquisition by means of a public contract, which, by other words, means a contract with mutual obligations between a contracting authority and typically a private supplier. The key word here is mutual obligations or reciprocal obligations, which leaves out a number of contractual arrangements as being not procurement at all. So why is this important to mention? It's because that if we are not dealing with procurement, it falls outside the procurement directives and the complex procedural rules of the directives. So the contracts can be entered into without any tender procedure. In the first legal chapter, we mentioned three examples of contractual arrangements that are not considered procurement. One of the examples are the so-called free choice contracts, where the contracting authority provides a range of contract possibilities, typically framework contracts, to be used by a specific number of citizens or private businesses, for instance in connection with a subsidy program, and where the supplier is finally chosen by the citizens or by the companies included in the program. The description of free choice contracts is exemplified by a recent case ruled by the European Court of Justice in May this year. Although the chapter doesn't contain examples of free choice contracts that are related to the thematic themes of SPICE, transport, ITS, or mobility, we assume that free choice contracts may be utilized in various sectors, including transport and mobility, and the aim of mentioning the free choice contracts in the chapter is to raise awareness of the subject and thus to widen the palette of possibilities when planning on how to implement new innovative solutions for transport and mobility. If you're interested in more examples of business models that are not considered procurement, please revisit the slides from an earlier SPICE webinar on how to go Mars, held in September last year. More exact, the slides How to Procure Mars by Sami Sahala, and the slides are available on the SPICE web page under the tab Library. Following the definition of procurement, the first chapter digs into the definition of research and development and the definition of innovation, highlighting that research and development and innovation is not the same. The definition says innovation means the implementation of a new or significantly improved product, service, or process. The key part of this definition is the implementation of a new or significantly improved product, service, or process, which might be rephrased to commercial utilization by end users of research and development. The difference between research and development and innovation is well illustrated by the Commission's PCP illustration from 2014, showing the conceptual difference between procurement of research and development and procurement of innovation. In the figure, research and development procurement is illustrated in terms of PCP. However, procurement of research and development can take place in many forms with or without competition. I won't go further into the discussion on how to distinguish between research and development and innovation, but if you're interested in the subject, the legal chapter contains a short description of how to distinguish between research and development and innovation by using the TRL scale. It also contains a rather important issue, in my opinion anyway, on why software development only very rarely qualifies as research and development. But why is it so important to distinguish between research and development and innovation in terms of procurement? That is, of course, which some of you might know, that procurement of research and development is exempted from the EU procurement directives, which means that you can actually procure research and development services and also test and prototypes without using a tender procedure. Contrary to this, procurement of innovation, which is the commercial procurement of research and development results, are subject to the EU procurement directives if the contracts are above the threshold. So in this content, please be aware that many cases in the fields of ITS, transport and mobility that you hear about are actually cases on research and development procurement, which you might not be able to use as inspiration for your innovation procurement projects because it simply falls out of the procurement directives. Chapter 4 in the legal part of the SPICE report gives the reader an introduction to the European legal framework for procurement, including innovation procurement. I'll not go further into the content of the chapter in this presentation, apart from highlighting a few points of attention. As a rule, procurement of innovation is not dependent on the directive under which the procurement action takes place. For instance, whether the procurement falls under the procurement directives or the utilities directive, which today most of all is a result of the harmonization of the the procedures in those two directives. However, the chapter contains a separate sub-chapter on concession contracts, as SPICE wish to raise awareness on the possibilities that lie within concession contracts, and especially on how concession contracts may support innovative solutions. One of the advantages by using concessions is that when tendering concession contracts, the procurement authorities do not have to follow the complex procedures subject to the procurement directives. Thus, tendering concession contracts may be done in a very flexible way, and even in some occasions by direct award without tendering. A second advantage is that the financing and operation risk in concessions lies within the supplier, making this a potential incentive and catalyst for introducing new innovative solutions to solve the task. However, classifying a contract as a concession contract should always be done with great care, as if the contract turns out not to be a concession contract, the contract may be seen as entered into by violation of the procurement directives. Chapter 5 of the legal chapter introduces the reader to different procurement procedures available in the procurement directives, with a focus on which procedures to choose when aiming at innovation procurement. The main conclusion in this chapter is that, as a rule, innovation procurement is not dependent on the choice of procurement procedures. Thus, for instance, the non-dialogue based procedure, open dialogue, may be used in procurement projects where the procurement authority is able to specify in detail which solution it wants, but by using, for instance, open specifications to a certain extent, the tender may be open for new solutions and maybe yet unknown solutions to win the tender. Such procurement methods are called innovation-friendly procurement. This means that by using some of the procurement approaches that I will go through in a minute, a procurement authority will make may make its procurement processes innovation-friendly by using some of the approaches available, provided that the economy and policies of the authority actually allow this. And one aspect of this is that innovation-friendly procurement require a political and strategic focus on innovation and long-term economic planning, and not only a focus on lowest price criteria. When this is mentioned, the rest of the chapter is based on the assumption that innovation procurement is often about complex and new technology, and that the procurement authority is actually not capable of specifying a solution that can fulfill its needs, or maybe does not want to specify such specific solutions. In that case, the rest of the chapter is focusing on the procedures containing possibilities for dialogue with the market or the tenderers. If this is a situation, the dialogue-based procedures will very often be the right tool to use in a view to narrowing down solutions available, affordable, or possible as a solution to be procured. And that is because that if you are using open specifications or only specifying your needs, you will be able to, under these procedures allowing dialogue with the market, to gradually amend the tender documentation accordingly. Of course, you have to be aware that you cannot use the dialogue-based procedures in any time, but for certain procurement actions, including procurement actions where adaptations have to be made to already available solutions are needed, you can use these procedures. The rest of Chapter 5 on the procurement procedures contain a comprehensive discussion on how to choose between competitive dialogue and innovation, between competitive dialogue and innovation partnership, being the new procedure combining procurement of research and development and innovation into one tendering process. The chapter is rather comprehensive, and it, for instance, contains a discussion and a conclusion on when competitive dialogue may be used to fulfill the same needs for consecutive development in phases as in innovation partnership, but at the same time offering the procurement authority a proof of concept before entering into the contract, and by a less resource demanding procurement process. Chapter 6 of the legal chapter is about the so-called procurement approaches. By procurement approaches, we mean that these are the operational approaches, technical or legal, one can adopt and mix for each single procurement project to enhance the possibilities for innovative solutions to win a tender. In the SPICE report, this chapter on procurement approaches is considered actually the main chapter of the legal chapter, being the most operational chapter. The examples of procurement approaches that we mention and discuss in the legal chapter are these 8 procurement approaches. The first one being market consultation, on how you can approach the market before you launch the tender, and how you can have a dialogue with the market in a view to know what the market contains, what the market can offer, and how your tender documentation should be made. Number 2 is about functional and open specifications, on how you make your technical specifications on an abstract level, not to narrow down technical solutions to win the tender. Variance is about how to both open with very precise technical specifications and also with open specifications. Total cost of ownership, life cycle costs, is also a way of approach your tender specifications in a view to optimize the solutions that you need. Using innovative characteristics for qualitative evaluation is about how to specify what you think of when you are requiring innovation. We'll go through this approach just in a minute. And then we're also dealing with questions of paying for participating in the dialogue, and a theme on free test sites, and also on joint cross-border procurement, which is also described more in depth in work package 4, which also will be presented today. In the SPICE report, maybe I should, no, I'll just go to this one. As I said, using innovative characteristics, this entails the theme on how you actually specify what you are thinking of when you are describing that you need an innovative solutions. When evaluating incoming bids, the procurement authority has to comply with the award criteria specified by itself. The overall award criterion is very often, obviously, a best price quality ratio divided into sub-criterion of price and one or more sub-criteria of quality. If the procurement authority needs a new solution to a known problem, it might need a new innovative solution. But what will count as innovative solution, as I just mentioned? In this sense, it will not be enough just to write that the procurement authority will put weight on innovative solutions. By other words, it has to be transparent what the procuring authority sees as innovative in order for the competitors to prepare the bids, or the best bids, for winning the tender. The principle of transparency is mentioned in the procurement directive, which stresses that I'm just reading from the Procurement Directive now, Article 67. Award criteria shall not have the effect of conferring an unrestricted freedom of choice on the contracting authority, and furthermore that the specifications shall allow the bids provided by the tenderers to be effectively verified in order to assess how well the tenders meet the award criteria. This is what lies behind the principle of transparency. So how can we make the requirements of innovation transparent? In the SPICE report, we have mentioned a range of examples divided into objective approaches and subjective approaches for defining innovation. This is examples of objective measurable criteria for innovation, which, for instance, can be based on how close a solution comes to meeting specific standards, or how close a solution comes to meeting specific labels, or also how, for instance, the efficiency of objectively measures on, for instance, time, speed, loading or unloading, and so on. That's examples on objective criteria for innovation. We're also dealing with subjective measurable criteria for innovation, which, for instance, can be feedback on user experience using the tender procedure from, example, expert users. For example, of how to operationalize this demand for transparency in defining what innovation is. In the SPICE report, we have included an example from a specific case, the Clean Cluster case, which was about procurement of an innovative plastic sorting and reprocessing solution. In this tender, we have taken and copied some text into the report showing how you can actually very well define what you mean by innovation in your tender procedure. During the SPICE project, it has been questioned whether innovative characteristics may be measured or evaluated by a board of experts or maybe a jury. And I would say to this that if the function of such board of experts is of pure subjective character, for example, involving assessment on architectural characteristics, artistic characteristics, design, or on pure arbiter of taste, such approach is not recommended, as it very well may conflict with the principle of transparency, as just mentioned. Instead, if the authority identifies a need for such flagrant subjective approach in the specific tender, the choice of the procedure design contest might be an option for this tender. You can read more about this in the chapter, in the legal chapter. Because of time available, I will just go to the last slide in my presentation, which is about the last chapter in the legal chapter on contractual approaches. This chapter gives examples on how you can use different contract models with the aim of also being a catalyst for innovation during contract term. For instance, if the technical specifications in the tender documentation has not been fixed or specified to a detailed level. We use 3 examples of such contract models, which are the alliancing partnering model, public-private partnership model, and also how to use agile contracts, which are all contract models that allow flexibility, dialogue between suppliers and contracting authority, and also acting as a catalyst for innovation. For instance, also by introducing incentive systems that enhances the possibilities for the suppliers to come up with new innovative solutions before the final delivery of the contract object. As a 4th example, we are mentioning a theme of how to apply test and test phases, which is also in very much connection to when using technical specifications which are abstract, because the problem many times are, I mean, how do we secure that we actually get the solution that we wanted, that we procured for? And then this chapter is about how to set up different tests and test phases for different kind of contracts, with also examples on how different projects have done it in real life, also illustrating a test concept, test phase in a complex ICT procurement. Well, this was for now what I wanted to say. We have agreed that I have 4 more minutes left, but yes, we will ask if there are any questions. Yes?
We already have a question. If you can spend a few minutes on this. It is, can you specify the threshold for PPI? And the follow-up for that is in connection with whether or not procurement falls under procurement of WTO rules or not.
Well, the thresholds for PPI, which is the thresholds for innovation procurements, are exactly the same as for any other procurement objects. So it's the same thresholds as for services, as for buildings, or for goods, works. So this was what I mentioned. What I mentioned is that the procurement directive does not have a special regime for innovation procurement. It's the same rules that apply for innovation procurement. What innovation procurement is about is more about using different techniques and considerations on how to enhance the possibilities for obtaining an innovative solution. About the question on whether the WTO also apply for innovation procurement, I would say yes, it's the same as innovation procurement, and PPI is the same and under the same restrictions and the same regime as any other procurement activities.
Thank you very much. If there are any further questions, then please write them. Otherwise, we go on to the next presentation, which is my own, coincidentally. And this presentation will be on, sorry, wrong slide. So, well, yeah, I will be presenting, like Lasse, I will be presenting with a basis in the deliverable 3, the issues and recommendations deliverable, which is also summarized in the white paper slides, and all the slides I will be showing are from the white paper as well. So I will be, as you see in this slide here, I will be focusing on intelligent transport systems. Well, there you go. So, specific issues with intelligent transport systems are that intelligent transport systems cover a very wide variety of solutions. So, when you're procuring intelligent transport systems, you're not simply procuring specific equipment or specific software. You are procuring any system or solution that in some way or the other improves mobility and transport. And there are a wide range of solutions, as said, and therefore the technical chapter within the SPICE deliverable, the Workplace 3 deliverable, that Lasse also mentioned, is a general, touches upon general recommendations when procuring ITS. Some of the ITS can be defined as a digital layer on top of existing the physical or electronics infrastructure. So I think you would be able to say that, for example, traffic signals are either ITS or not, depending on their degree of intelligence and their degree of connectedness. And on top of that, introducing sensoring system, information systems, all that can be regarded as ITS. Yes, and ITS is very sensitive because it's built upon existing infrastructure. It is very sensitive to legacy and vendor locked-in systems, which also can be seen as a barrier for procuring these. Because if you are vendor locked in a foundational system, it will be harder to freely procure a system built upon this. The main trends within ITS is that the main overall trend is that the central traffic management system is becoming a platform for connecting a variety of different existing systems within a city. Additionally, and also something that new ITS systems are being connected into, and therefore it's beginning to emerge as the central traffic management system of a city could use, or a region, or even a country, starts to become the smart, let's say, smart technologies, the smart city platform, which a city or region will use. Yes. Oh yeah. So then, of course, there are some challenges. Well, this isn't. These are really both challenges and solutions. Anyway, the interconnectedness of systems. So I would go so far to say as a lack of interconnectedness of systems and a lack of communication standards between systems and protocols is a challenge when procuring ITS. So a good solution here is to map, to get a good overview. I will come back to this later. Vendor lock-in, as I mentioned, is a challenge for ITS. And also in procuring ITS, you really want to have you have a flexibility to be able to iterate or change the system or solution you are procuring and evolve that gradually. So the challenge in procuring ITS is if you have systems that are fixed or rigid in some way, or procedures that are fixed or rigid, that inhibit your ability to evolve and iterate your intelligent transport systems solutions. Yes, of course, and we have some challenges until very recently. The users haven't been really taken that much into account in developing and procuring ITS systems. I mean ITS solutions, and this is slowly and gradually with user involvement, co-design, but also for evaluation purposes, is becoming a solution to this challenge of lack of involvement that has been here, that has been in the field before. And of course, often one very good consideration to do before procuring an intelligent transport system or solution of some kind is there a need for a complex solution? So let's say if you want to promote bicycling through some kind of solution that makes bicycling more convenient, will it be better to make some kind of app or some kind of integrated solution? It might be, but if you don't have any physical infrastructure that can like simple physical infrastructure that in itself promotes bicycling or makes bicycling more convenient, then a overarching intelligent transport system might not be the first step to take. So that's always is there a simpler solution which might still be intelligent but not technical in that sense. So these are some of the challenges and considerations. I'll go into more depth with a few of them in the following slides. Yes, for example, vendor lock-in is, as I said, an issue, which means that you are limited to a certain vendor or certain very limited amount of companies that can bid on your tender and that can, for prices that are affordable. This also often means, vendor lock-in also often means that the SMEs are held outside of being able to procure because the systems where ITS systems have to be built upon are depending on few very big players on the market. So good recommendations to avoid vendor lock-in in the procurement of intelligent transport systems is definitely to learn learn both about your own existing systems through the challenges that small pilot projects and living labs make apparent. So really get an understanding of what you have already, how it can be connected to third-party systems through these smaller projects. This is in advance of an actual procurement. Of course, this understanding to be expanded, it's a recommendation to create a detailed system architecture and plan for integrating different systems. What is the plan for all the systems and subsystems that you have, the intelligent transport systems and subsystems that you have in your city or region? What is the plan for those? What are you going to do with those the next couple of years? Are you going to discontinue some solutions, some systems? Are you going to integrate them? What are your plans? And take such a plan into consideration when procuring ITS. And then, of course, slowly but surely, of course, there are a lot of proprietary and closed protocols within any city or region. And slowly, with each ITS procurement, try to write tender documentations in such a way that promote open protocols and open standards. Yes. So, data policies are also good to take into consideration before procuring an ITS system, especially not necessarily GDPR type data, but how is data going to be how is data going to be shared? So it's a good also again to include SMEs and educational facilities to have a platform of some kind that in a homogeneous or uniform manner in some way or the other shares the data which you already collect. This type of data policy can itself lead into a procurement because then such a data platform will need to be procured. But this allows a lot of smaller players to have access to creating some solutions which you might be able to try out and at some point possibly even procure. So sharing data, as long as of course it's private and anonymized and aggregated in some way, then that's recommended. Yes, and then my last slide is procuring a central traffic management system or a smart city platform of some kind or a modeling system. These are to a higher degree back office systems which are used by traffic operators to ensure mobility or whichever purpose they might be purchased to ensure. And there, of course, it is important that because more and more there is more of it's not only traffic engineers that work with traffic anymore. Now you have all kinds of educational people with different educational backgrounds working on handling traffic. You have people with communications backgrounds, engineering backgrounds, of course, behavioral experts or scientists, which need to have access to data and be able to at least understand what they are looking at in some way and be able to manipulate the system. Therefore, a recommendation when procuring a central traffic management system is to, or any other as such, but is to look at the user friendliness of that system. I think a good example is can be taken from how apps are made today. They are made extremely user friendly, but with a lot of different functions anyway. So of course integrate all users and modes. So create a traffic management system or a system that takes modes into account that you might not traditionally be relevant for you. We can easily mention here bikes and pedestrians, of course, but maybe in the future there will be we need to have concepts or it needs to be prepared to take, for example, autonomous vehicles into account. And then the last point here I will say is to anticipate a merge between traffic modeling and with machine learning into what is classically operational daily traffic management systems, and to have some considerations on how much automation is wanted into traffic. That's always a good consideration, because you can do fully automated a fully automated transport and traffic network within a city or a region. But is this wanted? And if so, which goals does the system prioritize traffic on? All these are key considerations that the SPICE project recommends when procuring a traffic management system. Of course, there are many other issues and recommendations, such as you see here in the both in the deliverable 3, the Workpack 3 deliverable of the SPICE project, but also in the SPICE white paper, and both of which can be found on the SPICE website later today or tomorrow. Thank you very much. And I see I have not gotten any questions. Is that correct?
There is no question at the moment.
Perfect. So we will go on to Pia, and I will, perfect.
Yes, so good afternoon. My name is Pia Karjalainen. I'm representing Ertico ITS Europe from Brussels, which was one of the SPICE consortium members, and in our part we were focusing on the dissemination in this SPICE project and capacity building activities, but in addition to that also policy framework for public procurements and how it also all relates to general policy goals of the European Union and of course different member states. So in my presentation I will familiarize you with the policy framework for the public procurement and sustainable urban mobility. So let's start with the general policy framework. There are horizontal and vertical aspects in that framework. So first of all, of course, how the transport policy is guided or steered in the European Union context. We have low emission mobility strategy published in 2016, and it was basically something which Commission published quite soon after the Paris Agreement. And it's giving tools, measures, and also some goals for the decarbonization of the transport policy and transport in whole European economy. In addition to that, we have a horizontal EU public procurement strategy, which was published in October last year, 2017. And there the idea was to put public procurements more in the strategic and needs-driven context. And also one of the main targets of the European Commission when it's published that EU public procurement strategy was to support the achievement of the EU's other policy goals like single market development, competitiveness, innovations, digitalization and decarbonization, and also involvement of the small and medium-sized enterprises. Why it's so important to consider both the horizontal and vertical sort of policy goals is of course the fact that first of all public procurements, they are representing 14% on average in the economy. So if you consider OECD countries, it's 14% what of the all finance or funding in the economy is channeled to the market through public procurement. So it's quite important and significant amount of money or funding in the economy, and then you should use public procurement not only to produce, to only purchase some services or products, but also see that how the funding can be used more efficient or channeled more efficient, effective way in economy. That is especially important in transportation sector because public sector, cities, different regional authorities and also national authorities are having really strong presence in the transportation. They are often responsible for the infrastructure management. They are often responsible for the fleet operations in public transportation and also the overall control of monitoring and traffic management functions as just described. So we don't have clear figures, but the presence of the public sector in transport sector is much more dominant than what is in any other sector in the economy. There is also bigger policy framework what to make it so important for transportation to consider, for example, the goals related to sustainable economy and sustainable environment. So, of course, we have the Paris Agreement, which is focusing on the greenhouse gas emission reductions, but then we have goals for the air quality, which is really important in city context. We have energy efficiency goals for transportation, and then we should consider also the noise limits in densely populated areas. It's also important to remember that transport still represents almost quarter of the Europe's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's actually only sector in the European economy where the greenhouse gas emissions haven't been decreasing since 1990 when we started really ambitious measures or ambitious walk towards more sustainable transport and sustainable economy. But although there has been different measures which has been executed, the development haven't been or hasn't been too positive so far. So in this general context, we have put together some recommendations as a part of this SPICE project, and I will now walk you the main or most significant, most important recommendations related to policy topics, and these are touching both EU framework, but also I include some examples what can and should be done or considered in national, local, and city level when doing public procurement. First of all, it's important to always align different policy goals in different administrative level and between different administrative sector. So first, for example, there's often coexistent or synergy or relationship between transport and energy policies. And when you are, for example, starting some sort of local energy production, it's quite important to also consider how that local energy production can be used in local transportation system in order to reduce emissions and in order to make that all better working together. And in addition to actually achieve that better collaboration or coordination between different sectors, the first step is really to, as widely as possible, to communicate the different policy objectives, whether they are related to transportation, energy policies, involvement of small and medium-sized enterprises, or, for example, digitalization within and between different administrative sectors, and also to market. The second really important recommendation from SPICE project is to use public procurement as a strategic or more strategic tool to achieve secondary policy goals. I don't actually like the term secondary goals, because never the environmental goals or digitalization or societal goals should be considered as truly secondary for something else. But here I'm just only making reference to the fact that the main function or main goal in public procurement is always to purchase services or products, but in SPICE context we would like to emphasize that it's always important to see how that money what we are channeling can also support every other actions or every other achievement in the public economy. So here there are two recommendations. First of all, you should set clear key performance indicators for the procurement procedures and for the outcomes. So you can, for example, set indicators for small and medium-sized enterprises, how much they are involved and how big a percentage of the tenders are coming from the smaller enterprises, or you can for example set some indicators for the involvement of the end users in the public procurement, because that is also a very important aspect, that more and more in the modern society and in the era of digitalization, we should also ask from the end users that what are the expectations and what they consider as the main problem, what should be solved through public procurement. In addition to setting some indicators, it's also important to consider the actual impacts of the procurement in long term and also short term. So, for example, in terms of the compared to our goals of more sustainable transportation, we can use modal shift as a long-term impact measure for the success of the public procurement. This was partly touched already in Josh's presentation earlier, but open data policy is now becoming more and more important aspect also in public procurement. One thing here is that the open data policy is one of the most important tools how public sector can actually encourage or support different innovations in economy, and it can also work in a way that when we are making more data available in the economy, there are different innovations just popping up and coming in the economy. They probably are not even related to the main scope of that certain public procurement, what you are executing, but they can be something which will be born as a side product of that public procurement procedure. And here there are actually two ways to do or support the open data development. First way to do is to set some sort of obligations in that public procurement procedure for wide data sharing and use of standard APIs. So basically then in a contract you are saying that, or setting obligations that, for example, if the contract or procurement is about the transport services, you set the selected transport service providers' obligation to open the databases regarding the routes, regarding the schedules, so that also other mobility service providers can deploy that data and maybe develop some services which are related or built on that transport services what you are currently procuring. Then the other way to do it in the context of public procurement is see how different reciprocity tools or measures between public sector or public procurement unit and service providers can be established. And there are some examples from the US market where, for example, market access has been provided to transport service providers with easier standards if they are willing to share some information then with the city, and that information can be, for example, about the demand of the transport services. It can be optimized routes selected by the transport service providers, something like that. Mobility as a service is quite a topical question and also widely discussed in the European context. One interesting question around mobility as a service is for cities is that how to get started with mobility as a service. And as the next question, that would it be something what you can procure, or will it happen in a market-driven, as a result of the market-driven development? Here I would encourage, first of all, to really get a good understanding what is the main mobility problem in that certain region, in certain city, and then use mobility as a service to actually solve that problem in the best possible way. So as a first step, we need just a really clear understanding what are the mobility needs in that certain area. Then as a next step, we should gather all the different stakeholders who should be part of that problem solution or that solution in that area, and actually as a result of a co-creation or collaboration to define whether it can be then best solved by the public procurement, or sort of like coordinated action from the public sector side, or would it be more easily to be born or solved as a different combinations, or as a combination of different market-driven actions. If I'm going to the next topic, it's also important to align public procurement with the sustainable urban mobility plans, what cities are obliged to put together and execute. So here the first recommendation is used, of course, public procurement as a tool to achieve and support the goals as they are described and defined in context of the sustainable urban mobility plans, and also sustainable urban logistic plans. But then also other way around, use sustainable urban mobility plans to communicate the forthcoming procurement needs and priorities of the public sector. So to somehow indicate the direction where that city or region is going now with its mobility solutions and mobility system, and then give a clear indication for market in very early stage that what kind of needs and procurement there will be, let's say in 2, 3, 4, 5 years term. One really important question what was touched already earlier in Josh and also in this my presentation, it's increased user centricity and need of increased user centricity both in the mobility system but also in public procurement. And how we can actually do this is engage, of course, the end users as much as possible. It's in particular important to engage the users really to define the needs, to define the problems of what you can then solve by doing the public procurement. So it's important to engage them as much as possible in pre-procurement phase to define the desired outcome. But also after the procurement and during the procurement phase, it's important to include the end user and customers and, for example, set some key performance indicators for the procurement in terms of the customer satisfaction. And that also result as the improved and constantly improving satisfaction and user experience in the transportation system. Then we have been studying quite a lot of the market access and involvement of small and medium enterprises in transportation system. Why is that so important? Is due to the fact that it's often smaller and maybe newer companies who are the main source of the innovations, main source of the new solutions, and therefore we would like to encourage their participation in the transportation and mobility sector also as much as possible. Based on the studies made by European Commission, small and medium enterprises are still underrepresented in the public procurements. They are quite well already there when we are talking about the procurement of smaller scale, but when we are going in the bigger, more sort of expensive products or services, then they are still often, or we don't have enough small and medium-sized enterprises attending the tendering procedures. So here, what we like to do is to, or what we should do is to make them procurement opportunities more visible for the new market entrants, for the smaller companies, and that should be done by partly really well-targeted measures, because often the smaller companies, enterprises, they are not maybe following the main or the same channels what have been traditionally used to communicate the public procurement and upcoming tendering procedures. Then the second recommendation by SPICE team is that we have to ensure that the pre-qualification requirements or standards are not something which are hindering the presence or attendance of these small companies in that tendering process. And if we are talking about the sort of goals and indicators how we can also encourage the involvement of the smaller companies there in a market, is that of course we can, for example, use certain targets to what are set for the expenditures of or sort of like how big part of the public procurement should be win or won by the smaller enterprises. We can use these kind of measures or indicators to encourage or take care that they are appropriately or properly presented at the market. I was referring earlier that often they don't have chance to attend the competition if it's really like big or expensive or something like that. Then we can of course consider the option to divide the contract into many smaller pieces. And then there are two more general considerations how we can also encourage the attendance and presence of the smaller companies is of course try to decrease the administrative burden attending while attending the procurement procedures, and decrease the amount of documentation required. But also one quite nice way to involve smaller companies better is actually use e-procurement, because it seems that the digitalized forums or channels are a good way to make them the procurement attendance much more easier. So if I just repeat what has been said earlier, it's important to align the different goals and targets of or between administrative sectors and administrative layers, so streamline and align the goals. Pay attention that SMEs have good access to the market, and we communicate the procurement or upcoming procurement procedures also for the SMEs. We should support data sharing by different means. and we should communicate very clearly that what kind of procurement there is in the pipeline. And these haven't been maybe discussed earlier, but also in addition to public procurement, we should really use also agile piloting, for example, in the mass context. That is really good way to have a better idea about the real needs and demand in the system. And then one thing what I cannot emphasize enough is really the engagement with the end user. So before the procurement, involve them to understand the problems better. After the procurement, really see that what was the impact, how did we succeed. As has been referred also in the previous presentations, all this will be published in SPICE website as a recommendation report later today or tomorrow at the latest. And there you also will find some case studies or nice examples from different member states. And yeah, now I will stop my presentation for a while, and then I don't know, was there any questions? No. No, okay. So I think then we can give the floor to the next speaker, Sepe Vogel. Wait a minute, so I make you a presenter.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. You hand me the floor. Try to get the presentation full screen. Yeah, I will talk a little bit about common buyer groups or common procurements. It's only a short introduction. I will only spend like maximum 10 minutes on it. So that's pretty short. So I just give you a quick introduction what we did with SPICE, and then some main challenges and recommendations. Everything is possible to read it back in the deliverables of the SPICE project. So I'll just give you an insight of what you can find in there. Who am I? I just put a little picture on it because it's always nice to see a face with the person that is talking to you. I'm Sepe Vogel. I work at the Rijkswaterstaat in the Netherlands. I'm working in an Amsterdam practical trial. The Amsterdam practical trial is actually a cooperation between different public authorities. And we do test in intelligent solutions for traffic congestions. So we do major pilots tests in the area of Amsterdam, so with self-driving vehicles, with the integration of roadside system and in-car system. From that perspective, I'm involved in SPICE project. Just to give you a little idea of what we did in the SPICE project in relation to common buyer groups. We started on best practices and also definitions and forms of common procurement processes. They could be national or they could be local, but they can also be international on a European level, for example. Next, in the next slides, I will come back to the definition and I will tell you what it is or how do we see it. Then we had activity 2, and that's actually we try to bring together a couple of common buyer groups during the project of SPICE. But it's showed that it's difficult in timeliness and finding the right groups together during the project. So we supported existing or common buyer groups in the making by bringing them together, organizing webinars, workshops. We had individual contact, and
by sharing our knowledge or sharing each other's knowledge on these projects. Activity 3, it's an evaluation report. It's actually about it's an evaluation report on the support that we delivered during the SPICE project, and in there we summed up some benefits, challenges or barriers, and recommendations on how to cope with common buyer groups. So what is a common buyer group? It's defined as a group of 2 or more procuring authorities. They are working together. They have one common issue concerning procurement, and we focus on innovative mobility solutions for the SPICE project. You can think about on national level, you combine from ministries the procurement of electric vehicles, or think about procuring smart traffic lights in a broader way than just one municipality, but maybe a couple of municipalities together. It's like I say, it's precarious organizational units depending on the circumstances and the need of the individual procurement. So we also have different forms of common buyer groups that we identified. In the deliverable 4.1 we go in much further detail on those different forms, but I'll give you a quick overview. One is the joint procurement. That's the one that the European Commission defined. So you work as different procurers from different public authorities together to a single tender document. Another one is joint procurement via a central body. So you decide on one central body and which does the procurement process for you, and from different procurers you can use the central body, and from the central body the tender documents are made. Of course you can also, another form is the parallel procuring. That's a way to share certain common elements in the procurement process, but you are responsible for the tender yourself. So it has some strength and weakness as well. I will not go into detail here now. And then we have a form where we have common specifications. So from a central place you decide on common specifications which will be shared with different procurers or procuring bodies, and they will use it for their own procurement task. In the webinar from February this year, we go a little bit more in strengths and weaknesses, and there's also a couple of common buyer groups that will explain their challenges, issues, and approach to common buying. So that's possible to look back at it. Just some benefits. So we did workshops. We had support to a number of common buyer groups that are working with it, and they told us about benefits and also benefits from literature. And just a quick overview of what those benefits will be. For why would you procure together or procure in common buyer groups? First, of course, there's possible to share workload between partners, especially when procuring innovative solutions. It helps to be able to share this workload between you, so you don't have to find invent everything yourself, but be able to focus on the things that is specific for your situation. There's more knowledge and experience. Of course, different approaches in different companies, they have possibilities to find new innovative ways. This also, you can see it back in the economy of scale. Sometimes, especially with innovations, it helps to create a market together. Then we have harmonization of solutions. Of course, especially when you look at, for example, ITS or electric vehicles at this moment, it's not during the time of really technical research and development. You can imagine that harmonization and maybe standards is not the main goal to achieve, but when you're going into the innovation procurement, you would like to come up with the standards that work in more than one single situation or place. So during the workshops and the support that we delivered, we found some main challenges and barriers. You can see them in the sheet in front of you. They can be on technical parts. For example, the maturity level of the technology. From the research and design phase or phase of the technology or innovation, sometimes there's a lack of standardization. One example that you can find is like the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. It's not worldwide standardized yet. It's getting better, but it's not standardized yet. Then we have, of course, practical organizational issues. A lot of times, also timing, language barriers, especially in international common buyer groups, and sometimes conflicting interests. So the reason to work together may be different for different partners in the common buyer groups. Then specifically on legal issues, national legal frameworks sometimes or will differ from country to country, and sometimes also from organization to organization. It makes it, there are challenges to overcome these things. You need to trust one another and see if you can be flexible in how you interpreted those legal aspects here. What we find out, it's specifics on challenges of forming common buyer groups. This is also what we experienced in the SPICE project itself. You need to find partners that are share the same challenge and the same goal to achieve, and it should also be in the same timeline that you want to go for the procurement of this innovation. So from this specific, it's sometimes pretty difficult to form common buyer groups. But what you see is that bringing people together in for example, the SPICE platforms that we have, bringing them together helps to find each other. Of course, some time, money, effort. Joint procurement may cost more, and it requires a high level of coordination. You will see it. On the other hand, it helps also in sharing work or spreading out the work that you have to do. So it can also be cost saving. establish a trust and common understanding is one of the things that really is important to be able to perform a common buyer procurement. Knowledge, experience. Of course, those platforms help to create this knowledge and experience on how to do it and what to do it. Now we have the legacy or IT systems. A lot of times when people organizations come together and in a procuring situation, on the level of specifications and functionality, you see that there are not many differences, but when you look at different needs in relation to the systems that are already in place, it becomes more difficult. And what helps is, of course, standardization of certain specifications and ideas, and it helps to map your own systems and see how that fits together. Yeah, I said something about standardizations of specifications already. This also accounts for the common language that you need to speak in common buyer groups. These are real challenges to talk about the same thing. Legal challenges. Of course, Lasse in his presentation already talked a bit about this. One thing is the authority options that might be helpful to create a common procurement by a legal entity that performs a procurement, and others may be able to sort of copy it or become take an option on the same procurement. Let's see. Because I don't have more time to speak about it, I will ask you to look at the documents. It goes more in detail on those things that I just hit in the presentation just now, especially the evaluation report D4.3. It will soon be uploaded on the SPICE website. And of course you can read back the best practices of common procurements in the 4.1 deliverable. Thank you very much, and if there's any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions here, Lydia?
No, there is no at the moment questions, Sepe.
All right, thank you. Then I give the word for the next part of the agenda.
Yes, thank you very much. And that is coincidentally me with some final remarks. I just would like to say thank you very much to all that participated. I hope this was informative, even though it was very summarizing. If you have become interested in these topics, please go to our website, spice-project.eu, or go to our Capital e-learning videos, which will be uploaded very soon, already next week. And visit us, of course, at the ITS World Congress in the 17th to 21st September here in Copenhagen, where we are very excited to see as many as can participate. Thank you very much, and have a good weekend once you reach it. Bye.